This episode makes me so mad. So much so that I felt the need to break my normal third-person reviewer voice to tell you directly, dear viewer, that this episode makes me so angry. No Small Parts begins with the reintroduction of Captain Dayton, last seen in the episode Much Ado About Boimler, as she is given command of a new Federation starship, the USS Solvang. Almost immediately upon taking command of the brand new vessel, Dayton and her crew are attacked by a Baculi ship, which proceeds to rip out the Solvang's warp nozzle as the ship attempts to flee. This attack results in the complete destruction of the Solvang, and the death of every member of its crew. Meanwhile, a distracted Boimler leaves his combat channel open while making fun of Mariner for being Captain Freeman's daughter, revealing the nature of their relationship to the entire crew of the USS Cerritos. As a result, the crew begins to bombard Mariner with gifts and special treatment in an effort to suck up to Captain Freeman. In turn, Mariner decides that the only way to avoid this attention would be to transfer to another ship, and begins to straighten out her behavior in an attempt to earn her promotion to the USS Sacramento. Suddenly, in a case of mistaken identity, the Packlids appear before the Cerritos and begin opening fire upon the ship, believing them to be the Enterprise and seeking revenge for the humiliation caused by Captain Picard and his crew in the TNG episode Samaritan Snare. What follows is a full-on battle between the Cerritos and the Packlids, complete with Mariner using her rebellious strengths to outsmart the Packlids, Rutherford enlisting the help of Baculi, last seen in Terminal Provocations, to code a virus to destroy the Packlid ship, and Shax is sacrificing himself to save Rutherford and ensure the Cerritos escapes intact. However, after the Packlid ship is destroyed, the Cerritos is taken by surprise when 3 additional Packlid ships drop out of warp in an attempt to continue their fallen comrades' mission. Facing down their own imminent destruction, the Cerritos and her crew are rescued at the last second by the appearance of the USS Titan, piloted by William Riker and his wife Deanna Troi. The Star Trek alumni proceed to rain down fire on the Packlids, driving them back into warp and saving the Cerritos from total destruction. So why does this episode make me so angry? It's because if the writers removed everything ironic or humorous from this episode, such as the name Peanut Hamper being used by a robotic ensign, you would have a genuinely good Star Trek story. There are so many elements to this episode that feel authentically Star Trek. The Packlids destroying the Solvang out of their desire to add to their ships, Rutherford's compromise with a dangerous AI to save the crew, and even Freeman's conclusion that they ran into trouble because Starfleet does not routinely update their records or check in on already contacted planets, all feel like the sort of intellectual and protocol-guided conflicts that would be encountered by an official Starfleet crew in any of the classic series. Even the references to previous Star Trek series is handled well in this episode, particularly in the appearance of Riker, Troi, and the USS Titan. In previous episodes, nods to Star Trek's past were thrown in the viewer's face, to the point where it almost felt like whomever was making a given reference was directly addressing the audience and saying, "Hey, remember this? Don't you love this? You love this because you remember it." Conversely, in No Small Parts, these nods instead happen organically, with characters and references being brought up or appearing due to relevance to the story, rather than appearing solely to score nostalgia points with fans. Hell, if you'd have asked me even one episode ago if I would have liked to see my favorite Star Trek character, Riker, appear in Lower Decks, I would have groaned, complained, and guessed that he would have been handled in a horribly character-destroying way. To my surprise, his appearance, along with other references to past Star Trek media, actually made sense, and seemed like a realistic moment that would occur in between his time aboard the Enterprise and his life on Nepenthe, though the revelation that he was Mariner's mentor does feel a bit Mary Sue-ish. Of course, I couldn't review Lower Decks without gushing about how beautiful it looks, and No Small Parts is no small exception. From the explosive confrontation between the Packlids and the Starfleet ships, to the crew's hand-to-hand battle against the Packlid boarding party, this episode continues to provide evidence that Lower Decks is one of the best-looking animated shows on television, aside from its general dollar store Rick and Morty art style. Furthermore, special mention should be made of the scene wherein Shax rips out Rutherford's cybernetic implant, as this moment actually showed Rutherford's impacted and open flesh following the implant's removal. I definitely wasn't expecting to actually see something so realistically brutal, but Lower Decks has proven that it's apparently full of surprises. There's a lot to say about this episode, to the point where if I go on any longer, I'd end up either recapping the entire episode or falling into a rather optimistic discussion on where the series could go from here to keep up this level of quality. The most surprising thing to say, however, is that this episode was good, and that's why No Small Parts makes me so angry. If the entire season had even an eighth of the quality of this episode, fans would have experienced an authentic and admittedly interesting Star Trek series. In fact, one of my biggest criticisms for this episode is the fact that the story was compressed to a single 20-minute episode, as it could have easily been expanded into a season-long story arc, giving each emotional moment an appropriate amount of weight and sparing us all from 9 weeks of disappointment. Instead, Viewers were treated to a bad season-long Star Trek-based comedy sketch, with about as many laughs as expected. I cannot believe I'm optimistic for a second season. But if this episode is any indication, Lower Decks might just have the potential to become the best Star Trek series in the Kurtzman era. Though, truthfully, that's a very, very, very low bar. Pros. The episode is absolutely gorgeous, the Baculi plot feels authentically Star Trek, and the references to past Star Trek material feel natural rather than forced. Cons. The humor is still the weakest part of this so-called comedy show, and this episode leads me to ask, where was this level of quality all season long? Overall, 7.5 out of 10.